Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 92 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is oysters on rice and ice. The presentation, name, and taste of this dish will wow your guests. One raw oyster with a classic mignonette reduction is served on the half shell, sitting on crushed ice on one side of a martini glass. Next to it is a tempura oyster on the half shell with a sriracha ginger liqueur reduction, sitting on black rice. You will shuck the oysters, make the two sauces, and deep fry half of them. The challenges of this dish are to present beautiful, freshly shucked oysters, lightly golden, crisp, deep fried oysters, and martini glasses with perfectly divided rice and ice. Techniques today are shucking oysters, chopping, bringing to a boil, simmering, and reducing, making sauces, making a batter, plating, deep frying, keeping warm, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. All right, for the ingredients for this dish, we're going to need oysters, obviously. Now, we're going to need, if you make the number for the description, which is 8 people, that's 2 oysters per person. And 6 of them are going to be cooked and 6 of them are going to be raw on the half shell. So I have here the 6 on the half shell. They're on crushed ice. I'm keeping them in the fridge, keeping them cold for now. The other 6 are in a bowl, and you can just put them in the bowl and throw away the 6 extra shells. I'm going to put these back. Then we'll also need to have about 5 or 6 cups of crushed ice. This bowl represents crushed ice. I'm not going to crush it until, well, a la minute, all right, so it doesn't melt before we use it. If you don't have access to crushed ice, and I don't, I'm going to use regular ice cubes, put them into a Ziploc bag, pound them with a meat pounder until I have crushed ice. Okay. We need to have 2 cups of sushi rice that have been washed and drained. I already have done that, and they're already here in the rice cooker bowl. We need to have some black squid ink powder. We're going to need about a tablespoon of it. Now, you could buy liquid black squid ink, but I recently found this black squid ink powder, and the manufacturer says that it lasts a whole lot longer than the liquid squid ink. Now, liquid squid ink will last for a long time until you open it. After you open it, you have to use it pretty quickly or it'll go bad. The black squid ink powder is powdered, right? So you use what you need, and you seal the thing back up, and it lasts a whole lot longer. I haven't used this, is going to be the first time I use it. I think we're going to need about a tablespoon of it, but I'm excited about that. We'll need to have about 1/2 cup of flour, all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of buttermilk, those 2 things to make the batter, about 2 tablespoons of chopped shallots, finely chopped shallots, and about a 1/2 cup of red wine vinegar. We need to have about 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Now, I'm just going to eyeball that and grind it when we're ready to use it. You also need to have about 1/4 cup of the Canton Sriracha dipping sauce. There's a separate lesson on that, and also it was used in another lesson. So you need to make a batch of that. And you'll make more than you need, right? So you'll need, but you'll need you probably won't need 1/4 cup for this, but it's good to have 1/4 cup. You're just going to drizzle a little bit of it onto each one of the deep fried oysters. So if you're making 8, that's 8 oysters. You might not need a whole 1/4 cup, but have that much anyway. You'll need to have about 1 tablespoon of finely chopped red onion, kosher salt, and of course you'll need to have the pepper mill that we talked about earlier for making the freshly ground black pepper. Then you'll need to have at least 32 ounces of high smoke point oil, canola oil I'm going to use for deep frying, and I'm going to use actually more than 32 ounces, probably closer to 48 ounces, but you need to have at least 32 ounces. And then you'll need to have about 1 tablespoon of freshly chopped chives. Okay, that is all of the ingredients. We'll break, come back, and I'll show you the equipment. Okay, for equipment for this lesson, we're going to need a cutting board and chef's knife. Then we're going to need to have a martini glass for each person and a divider to divide it in half. Now, you can buy plastic at a hobby store that you can cut with scissors. I recommend that you buy it as thick as possible that you can cut with scissors, and then cut them out so that they just fit inside of your martini glasses in the middle. I used plexiglass that was really more like a 1/16 of an inch thick. I have a wood shop. I cut it in a wood shop. You may have a friend. You can have them cut it in a wood shop. Or you can buy some that maybe they're too thick to cut with scissors, but you can cut them with an X-Acto knife. Okay, so you can just score the plastic and then snap it. So anyway, you'll need one divider for each one of your martini glasses, as thick as you can get in plastic. You'll need a strainer to rinse your rice. You'll need to have a Ziploc bag, and I recommend using a double Ziploc bag. In other words, one bag inside of another bag, and a meat pounder to make your crushed ice, unless you have access to crushed ice. You'll need to have a small saucepan and spoon to make your mignonette sauce. You'll need to have a rice cooker for your rice, and then you'll need to have a deep fryer that we've used before. I'm going to use an actual deep fry pan. You can use any heavy bottomed pan that's deep enough so that the oil will not be sloshing out when you're working with it. You also need to have a deep fry thermometer or candy thermometer and a slotted spoon. You'll need to have a bowl to mix your batter, and I'm going to mix it with a fork, because even though this isn't technically a tempura batter, it is, I want to mix it like a tempura batter. Remember, tempura batter is never fully mixed. It has air bubbles, it has pockets of flour, and that makes your batter lighter and airier after it's been cooked. Then you'll need to have a baking pan and a cooling rack in the baking pan with some paper towels or kitchen towel underneath to catch the oil after you put the deep fried oysters onto the cooling rack. You need to have a couple of spoons to do your plating, and then you'll need to have either a small spoon or a small fork for each guest so that they can eat the rice. And the way it's going to work is that you're going to put cooked black rice on one side of the divider and crushed ice on the other side of the divider. You're going to put the cooked, the deep fried oyster on the side with the rice. You're going to put it right on top of the rice. And then on the ice side, you're going to put one of the oysters in the half shell. So you put the shell right on top of the ice. And then your guests will be able to pick up the oyster and just tip that oyster into their mouth out of the shell, or they can use a fork if they want to. And then you'll need to have a small fork or spoon so that you can eat the rice on the other side of the divider. Now, when we get to the plating point, it's going to be, timing is everything. We want to get it served quickly before the ice melts and the rice gets cold. Okay, it's tricky. Now, one way you can do this is to leave the divider in there. And if you take the divider out, they're going to start to mingle a lot faster, okay? You can leave the divider in. Some people might say, oh, I don't want that divider in there. Other people might say, no big deal. As another option for this lesson, you could find some kind of a dish that has two sides to it naturally. I've seen things like that for, I think for grilled cheese and tomato soup. And I've seen other dishes from time to time that have a divider in the middle. That would be perfect too. You don't have to use a martini glass, although I think the martini glass makes a very nice presentation. Okay, that's all the equipment that we need. We'll break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to make the mignonette sauce. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the red wine vinegar into our saucepan and add the shallots. And then we want to add about 1/4 tablespoon of freshly ground black pepper. And we're just eyeballing that, okay? And then we're going to put it on medium heat. Mix it up and bring it to a boil. And then what we want to do, once we get it to a boil, as soon as it comes to a boil, as soon as it starts to boil, not going to bring it to a rolling boil, we're just going to bring to a boil. As soon as it comes to a boil, we're going to reduce it to a simmer, reduce the heat to a simmer, and then reduce the volume by about half. Okay, we're just starting to get some boiling bubbles, so we're going to reduce the heat to low. I'm going to let this reduce in volume by about half. Okay, we've reduced in volume by about half. You can see about how much is there. And now what we want to do is turn off the heat, remove this from the stove, and let it come to room temperature. doesn't have to be cold, but we don't want it to be hot when we put it on the cold oysters. So room temperature is fine. But if you want to chill it in the fridge, that's fine too. All right, it's time to cook the rice with the squid ink powder. I've already put the rice, which was washed and rinsed, put that into the rice cooker bowl, and I've already added the water to it. You can cook it however you normally cook rice, or however you cook sushi rice. I have a separate lesson on making sushi rice, but that's more about seasoning the rice than it is about making the rice itself. You can also cook it in a pot, however you normally make rice. Anyway, what we're going to do though is, now that the water's been added, we're going to add about a tablespoon of the squid ink powder. And boy, look at that stuff. That is black squid ink powder, right? And I pulled more of like a heaping tablespoon out of this container. I'm going to put a little bit of it back, so it's more like a tablespoon. However, this is not a measuring tablespoon. This is a soup spoon. So, you know, we're just being approximate, and the effect is to get black rice, okay? And it's going to have some of the taste of the sea because of the squid ink flavor as well. So now, cook that however you normally would. I'm going to put it into my rice cooker and turn it on to cook, and it'll be ready in about 17 minutes. One thing I was going to do, which I didn't do on camera, was just to stir up the rice. Stir that squid ink powder into the rice. And then we're going to put that into the rice cooker. Okay, it's almost time to start cooking, so before we make our batter, we're going to heat our oil to 375 degrees. Okay, so you've already got your oil in whatever you're going to use for deep frying. You've got your candy thermometer or your deep fry thermometer, and you're going to now heat it up gradually, not at high temperature, but at medium temperature. It's much easier to control that way. Heat it up to 375 degrees and get it pretty stable at that temperature. All right, now let's mix our batter. We're going to put some salt, pinch of salt into the flour, and some pepper. And then we're going to add our buttermilk. And like with the tempura batter, we're not going to do a thorough mix, okay? We're going to get it to be kind of partially, you know, half mixed actually. Okay, our oil is up to temperature, so we've dipped our oysters into the batter. Shake off the extra batter like we always do, and then drop them into the oil. Okay, they are golden brown, and this is also when the sputtering starts to go away. We're going to put those onto our cooling rack and keep them warm until we are ready to plate, which is going to be in just a couple of minutes. Okay, it's just about time to plate that up, and look at how black that rice is. It's beautiful, okay? So a tablespoon of that powder was just about the right amount to use for this amount of rice. Now we're going to plate up, and we're going to start by putting some rice on one side of the divider. Then we're going to put ice on the other side of the divider. Okay, so we're about equal on both sides. Then we're going to plate one fried oyster on the rice and one oyster on the half shell on the ice, a little mignonette on the oyster on the half shell, a little bit of the Sriracha, the Canton Sriracha sauce on the camera cut off there for a moment, a little bit of the Sriracha sauce on the fried oyster, the chives on the fried oyster. And a little red onion on the cold oyster. And there we have it. That's the conclusion of lesson, I think it's 92. Oysters on rice and ice. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice Cook Like a Pro. Next up is house-made sausage with watercress aioli. We're going to be making sausage from scratch, okay? Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.